Welcome to In Layman's Terms. I'm Guy Nohra. I'm the host of the show. I think what we try to do is we take what are otherwise complex issues which normal people who are living normal lives don't have time to delve into, and we try to make them simple for them so that they can then be aware of what's happening in our world, which there are so many important things that are going on these days. We usually talk about several issues that I'm comfortable with. I think they range from life sciences, venture capital investing in the economy, the Middle East, politics, and I try to focus to the things that I know well. But it's amazing, God works in amazing ways, and every week there's a new topic. Today's topic is, in my opinion, as a Catholic, very big one. It's about the Pope, and I am honored to have Frank Pavone as my guest today. And Frank's going to tell us, hopefully we're going to discuss the succession, the logistics of the succession, how it goes, what happens. Really, if we can take you inside the real live thing, because most of you will see it on TV, and it's really, I think, emotional, and it's what fire, the smoke that comes out. Everybody knows this, but I really want to take you inside. And Frank is incredibly well versed in this. So before we go there, Frank, if you can tell me and tell us about yourself, and obviously I done my research on you. I'm very impressed in many ways. And you and I, I'm sure if we had a beer together, it would be a six pack by the time we're finished discussing some of the things we want to discuss. And by the way, I hope you drink. I hope I'm not insulting at all anything. But please, Frank, go ahead.
Thank you, Guy. It's a pleasure to be with you and with your audience. And I am from New York originally, and I became a Catholic priest in 1988. And I have always been involved in the pro-life movement. And so after serving in a parish for several years, I requested and received permission to devote my whole life and ministry to fighting abortion, serving the unborn, helping moms who are pregnant and didn't know what to do, also helping people who are suffering because of a past abortion. And that has been my work now for 32 years. And in the course of doing all of that and leading this worldwide ministry called Priests for Life, I got a chance to work at the Vatican. Now, this was under the pontificate of St. John Paul II. So I was over there in the late 90s and got to know, of course, the workings of the Vatican, and of course that interfaces with what we want to speak about today. But this mission is ongoing. It keeps me out on the road all the time, traveling, speaking, and doing a lot of what we're doing right now, broadcasting and helping people understand, just like you said, issues that might be complicated, trying to help them understand them in layman's terms. I do that all the time with the pro-life issues and with various things that relate to the church.
That's great. I really appreciate this. And then if you can tell us a little bit about yourself, I always like to go. I give my guests the choice. You can start at kindergarten or you can start in college. It's just up to you about how you ended up here, and then we'll go from there.
Well, I went to public schools and in Port Chester, New York. I always loved my studies. And although I had friends, I preferred to go to the library rather than to go to a ball game. And I would be very, very much in that mode throughout my junior high and high school years. In fact, I graduated a year early. And in that final year of high school, I became more religious. We had always been a church-going family, but besides, going to Mass on Sundays, nothing really beyond that. But in my senior year of high school, I really began praying more, reading the scriptures. I went to church every single day and began to have a passion for announcing and sharing the gospel with others. That led me to decide to go into the seminary, and I did that right after high school. Throughout college, I studied with the Salesians of St. John Bosco, a religious order that is committed especially to education of the youth. And after that experience, I ultimately ended up in the New York Archdiocese under Cardinal John O'Connor, and he's the one who ordained me in 1988. Then I did the parish work, and from there I picked up on the pro-life work, as I was just explaining. So that is in brief the journey that I've undertaken.
I must tell you, to me it's so inspiring to actually take that faith which happened, senior year, and continue it until these days. So thank you. So let's go into the subject here. So we as Catholics, but really the whole world, are saddened by the passing of the Pope. I think Catholic popes these days are so much more than just our shepherds. I mean, even within our church, they're very, very important, but they're also important for the world at large, and
Yes.
everywhere. And they're, some of the best known personalities. So Pope Francis passed away. Of course, our prayers are with him. But what and everybody, obviously, all the articles are being written, positive, yes, no, good, no good, the usual things. But what I would like our audience to first live through, and then we'll go maybe in different directions, is exactly what happens from the moment the Pope passes away until that white smoke comes out and millions of people worldwide rejoice, not to mention the hundreds of thousands at the plaza, which I get goosebumps thinking
Yes.
of.
Exactly. Well, the Catholic Church is a very old institution and has a lot of history, and many of the traditions that we see unfolding during these days have their roots in this long history. The Church, unlike, for example, the system of government we have in America, does not have a vice pope. In the United States, if we lose a president, either because his term expires or if he dies in office, the next president takes the oath of office immediately. So we don't want any time where we don't have a president. In the Catholic Church, it's different. Once a pope dies, we literally right now have no pope. Now, the closest advisors of the pope are the cardinals of the church. And so you have key cardinals at the Vatican now who are taking over certain key responsibilities. And as soon as the pope dies, the cardinal in charge then seals the apartment, arranges for the funeral, and starts the preparations of the meeting of cardinals called the Conclave that will elect the next pope. What begins also is a period of mourning. So there are 9 days where there are special prayer services, various ceremonies, and of course we're in the midst of that now. The Pope lies in state in St. Peter's Basilica. People come from around the world to pay their respects, and the cardinals of the church, meanwhile, from all parts of the world, are going to Rome right now so that they can both take part in these ceremonies, participate in the funeral, which will be on Saturday, and then carry out their very solemn responsibility of gathering in that secret meeting, which takes place in the Sistine Chapel, and deliberating, praying, and voting for the new pope. Now, once that meeting begins, then there's no communication from inside that chapel to the outside world, or from the outside world going in. They're completely sealed off, and they will actually announce by way of a smokestack whether they have decided on a new pope or not. So a couple of times a day, the smoke will come out either black, no, we haven't decided yet, or white, yes, we have a new pope.
Okay, so two quick questions. The first one is, what's the name? There's a name in Italian for the the person, the actual cardinal who's in charge. I want to say consigliere, but that's a different group. so.
Oh, yes. You're thinking of Camerlengo.
Thank you.
It's the Camerlengo. It's yeah.
Okay. So the Camerlengo is now in charge of the process. Is that
The
fair?
process. Yes, and that's an important distinction, Guy, that you just said. He's in charge of the process. He's not in charge of the church. And this is an interesting facet of what happens here. Once a pope either dies or resigns from office, like Pope Benedict did, everything freezes in terms of administrative decision making. Obviously, no papal decisions can be made. For example, the appointment of bishops or the acceptance of their retirement. All of that freezes. No other kinds of appointments to Vatican agencies. In fact, those who are in charge of Vatican offices, their job is now in limbo. They can't even exercise any official administrative decisions or issue any official letters either. So it's an interesting period of time where everything is in anticipation and expectation of the next pope. But obviously, things need to be done, and that is where these various cardinals come in with their specific responsibilities.
Okay, so what's interesting then for us and as Americans is that what we call governance is actually now frozen at the Vatican.
Yes.
Is that a fair way to say it? Yes. Okay, so
it is. It is.
So now we have 10 days of mourning, 9 after today, and again, one more time for me, the faith of people. People come from all over the world, right? They're very sad. I assume in this case there will probably be a higher number of Argentinians because it's you're the child, the proud. And tell me more about this. To me, I get emotional thinking about it because that kind of devotion. Here we are, we're working, and we have things to do. It's not like you're not going to hop on a plane to Rome and do that. But people do that, and they're normal people. They're people who don't have the money, who don't have the resources, but they do this because they feel so strongly. So tell me, expand to us about that.
Yes, it's a sign of the way that the church is structured and really the way that Jesus established the church to have this sense of unity throughout the world. One little simple fact, the name of the Pope is mentioned at every Mass celebrated in every Catholic church throughout the world every single day, from the time that Pope is elected until the time he dies. Right now, today, when a Mass is said, that part of the prayer is skipped because there is no Pope right now. But just that as one simple practical example shows that there is this deep sense of unity because Catholics look at the Pope as the vicar of Christ. Now, the word vicar is important because it's referential. The Pope doesn't invent doctrine. The Pope is not the origin of the church's teaching. He's a guardian of it. It all comes from Jesus. Like Jesus himself said, you have one teacher, the Christ. There are teachers in the church. They have the ministry of teaching, but that carries a 100% responsibility to reflect the teachings of the one teacher, Jesus Christ. So Catholics, when a pope is living, pay particular attention to what he says. And when he dies, it feels like a death in the family. It feels like the loss of a father. And that's what leads to exactly what you said, this phenomenon of people pouring in to Rome and into St. Peter's Square, because they really feel that closeness to the one who served as Pope. Especially, the longer a Pope serves, I mean, this was a 12-year pontificate. St. John Paul II was twice as long. But the longer a Pope serves, the more that becomes a reality. And the more that a Pope travels, too. Keep in mind how Pope Francis, like the several popes before him, made it a point to go to the communities, go to the local churches. And when you think about it, that's very much rooted in what we see in the Acts of the Apostles, where Paul and Barnabas and the other apostles, they did the same thing. Let's go visit the churches, they said. Let's go encourage the people that have accepted the faith that we have proclaimed. And that's at the root of this observation that you just made.
Yeah, and I will interject something very quickly. So, Frank, I'm a Maronite Christian from Lebanon, and we follow the Catholic Church. We were the only ones, and God knows we paid the price through history, including with the Byzantines. But we have been. I've been in America my whole life, but I keep track of the traditions of back home. And there's a Virgin Mary statue in the mountains, which every pope that I can remember, maybe not Benedict, but both John Paul and Francis went to, and I can't tell you the pride of every single Christian in Lebanon when that happens. To your point of traveling, so they and they're coming to a place in a region that, as you know, is very complex and where we are minorities, and we get persecuted. But he came to this place and kissed the flag and prayed to the Virgin, and the people, all 35% of the population that's Christian will never forget that and will always have that as a special thing in their hearts. So you're right about the traveling part. It's so important. I also understand with Pope Francis that he was very involved with the autistic community, and and as you know, one of the prayers, and the Beatitudes are the give me the simple of mind. So I think again, it reaches people where they are, and
Right.
So your point of everybody feels like they lost someone because of what they do and how much they travel is very, very true here. So now 136, is it, or 134 cardinals are flying into Rome?
Yes. Right.
So how many? Well, I tried to research the number and I got two numbers. I don't know, 134 or 136. I'm not sure.
Well, actually, yeah. There's 100. The best numbers that I've seen: 137
Okay.
cardinals who are eligible as of today. And they said that's why these numbers can change, because whose birthday is tomorrow and they turn 80, right? So the age of 80 is the magic number. And so once that conclave begins, I'm not sure that the date has been set yet when it's going to begin, as of the moment that we're talking now. But whoever has not yet reached 80 years old is eligible to actually vote for the next pope. Now, actually, there's an interesting exception that's been made here, because canon law says it's 120 as the limit. But Pope Francis allowed the number to go above that by another additional 17 members. So there'll be 137 as of today voting. But then there are over 100 others who have reached 80 or above. And so they still participate in meetings and debates and sharing information with the other cardinals and deliberating. It's just that they can't cast an actual vote in the conclave.
Oh, so they do. So possibly there's an 85-year-old, very influential cardinal from, let's say, the Philippines. And even though they don't vote, they are actually involved in the discussions and will voice their opinion. Really? Okay, I didn't know that. So that's great. That's good to know. So they participate.
Yeah.
So they're like an alternate juror. They participate, but they don't.
Yes.
Okay.
In a sense, right. And when you think about that, Guy, it's very important, because these cardinals, I mean, Pope Francis appointed a lot of cardinals, right? And a lot of them were from countries that never had a cardinal before. This reflects the Pope's desire to, go to the outskirts, so to speak, both geographically and in other ways, and to express the universality and diversity of the church. Okay, so that's all a positive. At the same time, these cardinals, because of the responsibility they're about to exercise now to elect one of their own as the next pope, they need to know each other. And they haven't come together very frequently. The Pope can call the cardinals together whenever he wants. And they don't just come together to elect a new pope. They come together to discuss matters of importance to the church. John Paul II, for example, called the cardinals together in 1991 to address the issue that I deal with all the time, abortion and the sanctity of human life. And so it was an important enough issue that the cardinals came together, just like they're coming together now. But Pope Francis has not brought them together all that much. So right now, I think every one of them feels the very serious duty to lean on the other cardinals, get to know them, and especially the ones like we're saying now who are more experienced, who have served as cardinals for decades. I think they're going to lean on those older men and say, hey, tell me what you think and what you know about these other men that we might be voting for.
Wow, that's fascinating. Again, as a political wonk here, because we're, unfortunately, politics are everywhere. So, okay, so they all come to town, and then after during the next 8 days of mourning, are they interacting?
Yes,
they are.
Yes, they are, and they are talking with one another. Absolutely, they're having meetings. They're praying together. They're getting to know each other better. Absolutely, that's all going on right now. And but there's an interesting rule in the church's protocol: no campaigning is allowed. In other words, they can't. Yeah, John Paul II made it very explicit. He says that you are not to start going around. It's like, in politics, it's perfectly okay to say, hey, listen, if you elect me, I'm going to do A, B, and C, and it's going to help you, right? That's part of campaigning. But the Cardinals are not allowed to do that. Now, that doesn't mean that some of them don't do that. But if they say, hey, you vote for me, and I'm going to do this for you later on, absolutely prohibited.
Okay, so it's just a getting together, praying together, discussing issues of this church together, but devoid of any obvious political campaigning, if you like.
Right. They can discuss. They can discuss the election itself of the Pope, and they should, but not personal campaigning like vote for me.
Sure. Okay. So now 9 days come by, conclave, the Swiss Guard, which are incredibly efficient and some of the best in the world, make sure the basilica has no no mics and no cameras and so on. And all of the cardinals give up any way they can communicate with the outside world. Now they're just going to be in here deliberating. Correct?
Right. That's exactly right. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Deliberating, and it's significant, isn't it, that the meetings and the voting take place in a chapel. That alone, the physical location, really says a lot about how they view this process. And when they cast their votes, they make a declaration in that chapel in front of the scene of the Last Judgment, no less, that is like a prayer. It's like an oath. It's not just I vote for so-and-so. It's I declare before God that in conscience I am convinced that this is the best person to be the next pope. And it's it really, if they have any impure motives, any selfish motives, just going through that ritual the way it's laid out and saying that affirmation, that public declaration, it's effective, I think, in keeping them spiritually on the right track.
I agree. It definitely is going to put their heart and minds in the place. So the outside world has they handicap names, and they throw out whatever names they think are relevant. It's kind of like criminology in a lot of ways. You and I are old enough to remember criminology. Some of our younger audience might not, but quickly you can Google that. Anyway, so
Yeah.
let's say the cardinal from one of the cardinals from well, we're just going to pick a random place, Paraguay. You know, in their mind, they're going to make a statement, as you said, which is a very solemn statement. But how do they know who? Do people rise? Do people will the same name keep coming around, or names come around? I can't imagine sitting with 130 people and saying, I think I'm going to vote for. There has to be some process or some way by which candidates are beginning to filter up.
Yes. Well, I would, and this is just speculation, I would imagine that once one becomes a cardinal, of course, they know that this is one of their most important duties. And it's easy to find out who the other cardinals are, even if they don't know them personally. I would suspect that they consider it right from the beginning of their time as a cardinal a duty to get to know more about the others. And then, of course, you see those who, just by following the news of the church each day, as the rest of us can do, you see those that distinguish themselves either in a negative or a positive way, or you look at how they have led their own country or their own diocese or Episcopal conference, or perhaps another way that some of them rise above the crowd, so to speak, is if they're given positions in Rome. You think, for example, back to Pope Benedict. I mean, after John Paul II died, and it's hard to believe that that's been 20 years already. It seems like yesterday. Everybody knew Cardinal Ratzinger. And the reason everybody knew him is that he had served for decades in one of the most important offices in Rome, an office to which all the other cardinals had to periodically come to give reports because it was the office for the doctrine of the faith. So every bishop, as some of our viewers might know, has to go to Rome every 5 years to give a report about their diocese. And one of the people that you have to meet with is the head of the office of the doctrine of the faith. Some of the terminology now has been changed, but everybody knew Cardinal Ratzinger. So, and right now, for example, Cardinal Tagle, who was on that list of possible contenders, or Cardinal Parolin, they're in very visible positions. Parolin is the Secretary of State. He's the number 2 man at the Vatican. I've had the pleasure of knowing him and doing some work with him in the course of our pro-life ministry. And Cardinal Tagle, again, he's the head of one of the offices there in the Vatican. And so that's part of what factors in. Then, of course, you don't know what kind of personal connections they might have with some of these other men. Of course, now, as we said before, they're asking one another, hey, what do you know about so-and-so? Or tell me about this man or that. And those kind of conversations are perfectly legitimate, and I hope a lot of that is going on. And I guess then the final factor is just what you said, that as the voting begins, they're going to hear certain names over and over. And maybe they don't know about that cardinal. But if they hear the name repeatedly, I think obviously on a natural level, that's going to arouse their curiosity. And they're going to try to find out more about that person during the time of the conclave.
So tell me if you agree with me, and if you don't, that's also okay. I'm thinking this is actually a pretty good process, right? It's a good process.
Pretty what process?
It's a good process.
I think so,
because it's organic enough. It's open. It's I might be someone who's never heard of one cardinal, but then someone votes for him. And I go back and I say, oh, it's pretty interesting. This new name came up. I wonder who that person is. And then during my next break, I can actually ask questions. And I like the organic process here. Being involved in politics for the last couple of years, I see how, primaries and these different systems that we have. But I really like this.
It's fascinating.
Okay.
Yeah, I like it very much myself. I've kind of jumped in quite a bit to American politics, and it's fascinating. And as you were just talking, it reminded me of another big dynamic here that's so important. These cardinals are discussing right now and praying about not just who are these other men, but what does the church need now? Are there course corrections that are necessary? Have we gone too far in one direction rather than the other? Are there wounds that need to be healed? And are there confusions that need to be clarified? I think under Pope Francis and an honest, analysis of his papacy, one has to see there's been a lot of confusion. He has said things that have made a lot of people scratch their heads, not only within the Catholic Church, but in the wider body of Christ. They say, well, what does he mean by that? Recently there was even controversy over the question of, well, is he saying that Jesus is the only way to the Father, which of course is standard Christian biblical teaching, or is he saying that other religions are equal paths to God? I mean, that's a pretty fundamental core question. So I have to think that the cardinals are considering, maybe we need somebody who's going to be less enigmatic or nuanced about the teaching of the faith, and is just going to come out very clearly and do what Jesus told Peter to do: strengthen your brethren. Come out and just, instead of Pope Francis, for whatever reason, I don't know, he raised a lot of question marks. And I think the cardinals are many of them are thinking, now we need someone who's going to raise a lot of exclamation points and reaffirm believers in what has always been the teaching of the church.
Very diplomatically said. I love how you said this, because I listened to a lot of the things that you said before. Thank you. I appreciate it on behalf of me and my audience. So now we're in the conclave. We vote. Do we vote twice a day, morning and afternoon, or how many times do we vote a day?
I think if I'm correct, that there are 2 voting sessions in the morning and 2 in the afternoon, I think.
Okay, and of course, the whole world's watching, and we should expect dark smoke initially a couple of times, because that's how this process has gone in the past. Meanwhile,
right,
the number of candidates is decreasing, and we're trying to work our way into 2/3. Correct?
Right.
Okay,
that's right.
Okay. So that's the process, and then of course I am going to go to what you were alluding to earlier about adjustments, or where are we now and where do we go from here as a church. But I want to finish the process. So eventually we get white smoke. CNN gets all excited. A million people in the square, and of course, depending which country the Pope is from, those flags are going to show up.
Mm-hmm.
And the people are going to be so proud and crying, and the bells are going to ring everywhere, and it's just a beautiful, just the pomp and circumstance. So that happens, correct? And then
yes, exactly.
And then so who asks the new candidate who won, will you accept this job? Who's the person, and what exactly do they say? I think that it's in Latin.
Yes. I have to recall that myself. There is a moment in which, when it is clear from the announcement of the votes that one candidate has gotten the required number, they are asked, "Do you accept? Do you accept?" And I don't know if it's the dean. There's a cardinal who's the dean of the College of Cardinals, and that's the one who will say the funeral mass, for example, and I think preside over the conclave. And then, that's a very, very significant moment. And then there's a room, once he does accept, there's a room there in the Sistine Chapel called the Room of Tears. And that's where they go to for the first time, put on the papal cassock and other accessories. It's hard to imagine what a person feels like at that moment. Very hard to imagine. But then they take the time that they need to take, but they don't have a whole lot of it, because now the whole world is waiting for them to appear on the balcony of St. Peter's. But the other thing, though, in terms of what the individual who's elected must go through, they see it coming. I mean, if they see that they got 40% of the votes the first time around, 50% the second time, then they've got to be they're going through a lot during the course of all of that, and it just must be, it's just unimaginable.
And all I can say is thank God for prayer, because that's all I would be doing. I'd be doing the rosary over and over if it was okay. So
exactly.
so it goes. Do you want that gig? Yes, I do. Okay, we're gonna get you ready.
Yeah.
And then somebody else goes out, and maybe you can tell me who that is. And he says, "Habeos Papam." We have a pope.
Habemus Papam. Yes, it's a beautiful announcement. The cardinal, the cardinals are ranked in different levels: cardinal, deacon, priest, bishop, and the cardinal deacon comes out and announces to the world. These are the words he uses: "Annuncio vobis gaudium magnum, habemus papam." I announce to you a great joy. We have a pope. And that goes back to what we were saying at the beginning. It's a joy because Jesus established this office, and he established it precisely for the unity of the church and for the strengthening of the faithful in the faith of the church. So it is a joy, and it's a joy for the whole world. And that's a really beautiful moment. I love to go back sometimes, and watch the announcements of the popes from the past, because it's just such an electric moment and very significant moment.
And again, I go back to the power of prayer, because if I was number 3, I would say, God, this wasn't God's plan for me. I do this, I ran for office and I didn't win. And at the end of the day, the advantage of being religious was that this was not my turn, and God decided. So I hope that that's how these cardinals interpret this. So okay, so now we have a pope. It's exciting. Everybody can watch TV. We don't have to tell them what they have to do. Our audience can just turn on any of the news channels, all of the news channels, and they'll see this, and it's just incredible. The Swiss Guard, nobody does it better. So isn't it ironic that there's a movie called Conclave that was floating around here for a while? I didn't see it, but I
didn't see it either. No, but yeah, it's very, very timely.
Okay, so now we're gonna get into, I think, something you've probably been itching to talk about. So to my surprise, I'm a naive Catholic, so to me, cardinals are cardinals, and we all love God, and we don't worry. But a week ago, a couple of days ago, I saw this graph that looks just like the graph of the French Assembly. And what I'm saying is, like, it goes from the left to the right, and it's got members, and and I'm like, wait, I don't mix politics and religion. But lo and behold, it goes left to right, blue to red. Just what we always try to avoid in the real world when we're trying to have Thanksgiving dinner with our other side members of the family. So tell me about that. So there are definitely different factions even within our church, and we're not gonna hide behind this. Pope Francis was definitely center left, if not just left in general. When you have 1.2 billion people, and you're it's how it works. So how is that going to play as part of the voting process? And do you predict we're going to try to stop and catch our breath and as a church and say, okay, where are we? Or are we even going to have more of a reaction, which is going to be, whoa, that's gone too far. You know, I'm stopping it. So how do you see that?
Well, as you well know, there are pendulums in politics. Whether we're talking about in the civic arena or in the church, there are pendulum in politics because there's a pendulum in human nature. And sometimes, things go too far in a particular direction, and the next election comes along, and there's somewhat of a reaction to it. I think now, and all of us are just speculating and guessing, but I would think there's going to be some pushback to having had for the last 12 years somebody who, like you said, was more in the leftist direction. And I think there needs to be, not just from the point of view of the cardinals thinking about their responsibility for the church, but also from the voice of the faithful. Here's the ironic thing, that Pope Francis has talked so much and instituted so many mechanisms to promote synodality. And first of all, there's a lot of vagueness in that anyway. But if the idea is simply listening to the people and what God might be saying through the people, well, then I think that by itself will lead us to think that there's going to be a course correction now. And what do we mean? Well, for example, that, Pope Francis talked about climate change, and he talked about, immigration. And, the challenge, not just for the Pope, but for a bishop or a bishop's conference in a particular country, like we have in America, the bishops' conference saying a lot of very specific things on a lot of very specific public policy issues. That's fine. But the bishops themselves have pointed out in various documents that there's a difference between the doctrines of the faith and the moral principles associated with them on the one hand. That is their primary role, to articulate that. But then when you come to how those principles apply to public policy, the bishops have a right to speak about that, even the Pope does, but they have to make the distinction for people that this is a matter of my judgment at the moment, my opinion. This is not a matter of doctrine. And unless that distinction is made, like, for example, Pope Francis obviously always was emphasizing welcome the migrant, okay? And a lot of the bishops talk about that too, welcome the migrant. You can emphasize that if you think that that's the point that needs to be emphasized at the moment. But the Catholic Catechism, which of course has to be a clear guide for Catholics and for the bishops entrusted with teaching that, makes it very clear that there are important limits there. There are important safeguards. There are conditions that a nation has both the right and the duty to impose for the good of its citizens, and to make sure that those who are entering the country follow its laws. So there's always a distinction to be made between here's the teaching and here's how we think at the moment it should be applied. As long as they make that distinction, it's perfectly okay for them to make those applications. But B, when it comes to the second category, it's perfectly okay for the faithful to disagree. So some people have the notion that the Pope is an oracle of God, that everything he says is from the mouth of God. The only person you can say that about is Jesus Christ. He's the one whose every word is the word of God, not the Pope. You can legitimately disagree with the Pope if it's a matter of practical application as opposed to a dogma of faith.
Thank you so much for saying this and clarifying this for me, and again, hopefully for our audience, because what we found ourselves in over the last couple of years, the worst position for me as a Catholic who I take my religious seriously is to disagree with my Pope, right? It's hard. And I wish he would have just said, I'm teaching about Christianity. This is my personal opinion, whichever way they want to say it, about an issue of the day. And then in my mind, I would say, well, good. I'm going to still go to church and not feel like I'm not true to myself. And you can have your own opinion as I have my own opinion. And by the way, you guys debated up there, but please don't make me feel bad for being an American who loves this country, who wants to make sure my people thrive, because that's what this is about.
Right.
So
That's
hopefully,
right.
I'm glad. Thank you for making that distinction, because I think we need to remind our leaders in the church that make this distinction. And if you make this distinction, we, as your flock, won't judge you, and we won't.
Right.
It's okay to disagree on these issues, because that's what. But on the other hand, we follow you on the things that are really, that are all religious and catechism, and yes, good. So.
Right. That's right.
I'm going to be following poly markets, because somehow money talks, even though money can't be inside of the basilica. But I'm going to see what
Uh-huh.
happens. I also pray that the Cardinals make the right choice for all of us. And my final
Yes.
question to you is, no matter what we talked about, how would you like to finish? Because I really have appreciated your time, and I've appreciated your openness and your diplomacy. And I just love to hear how you would want to end this discussion with me. And I do, and I'm serious about the 6 beers we can have at some point.
That would be a pleasure. I just want to end by thanking you, affirming you in your work. I mean, this is what we're doing here together is, and I'm happy to give you the time, because it's a service to our listeners. We love our audience, right? You broadcast, I broadcast. We love our audience, and we want to serve them, and we want them to come away realizing that, this was time well spent. They learned something, they were encouraged, and it equips them to then communicate to other people about these topics. So thanking you for your work, and then just putting an exclamation point on what you just said about let's pray for wisdom for these cardinals. And if I may, I'll just let you know and let the audience know that we have a special prayer campaign that we've launched now since the Pope passed away. And it's simply at prayercampaign.org. And at Prayer Campaign, we have a special prayer we've put there now, but we'll have additional prayers that will be added throughout the coming days, focusing on different angles of what our prayers should be asking for as we live through this important process of selecting a new pope. So I invite our listeners to join us there. Unite your prayers with this great intention, and let's renew our trust that Jesus is the head of the church, and that the Holy Spirit truly is guiding us all, and he'll make sure that what happens is for our best outcome, for our best good. So it's prayercampaign.org, and I am at your service, happy to catch up with you again in the future.
Well, so well said. And I, in full honesty, respect you so much for keeping the eye on the ball, despite all of the noise that happens in life, and keeping the eye on the mission. Because, it's one of the things I teach. If I have an entrepreneur who's running a company, they always have to keep their eyes on the ball. And I think you have,
yes,
in what is a incredibly heavy and serious and existential almost environment. So thank you so much.